Hello and welcome to the 50th episode. Hello and welcome to the 100th episode of the Money to the Masses. Hello and welcome to episode 150 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert. Hello and welcome to episode 200 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, we made it. Hello and welcome to the 250th episode with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leaks. We made it. We got to the 250th, and before we go on, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all the listeners who've been in touch to congratulate us, send us messages of support. It's been truly humbling in a way. It's been amazing. We've been talking about it in the office, and it's really given us a real big buzz going into Christmas and to create more and more of this content going into the new year and beyond. So thank you once again. Now, we have got some news for this week's podcast. It's a little bit of sad news because Damien unfortunately cannot make this 250th episode, but don't be too concerned. It's just laryngitis. He's lost his voice, so he's in the office here. He's waving at me, but he can't talk. So he's hugely disappointed, but don't worry. Damien will be back. And actually, you'll hear plenty of Damien in this very episode, because what we've got as a special for our 250th episode is a look back over previous episodes. Now, previously for our 100th celebration episode, we looked back and found our best bits. We've done a similar thing, but we've looked back and we've pulled out little bits and pieces that we thought might be interesting or a little bit of fun for you. There's less focus on the money on the 250th episode. This is more about Damien and I and Money to the Masses and how we've evolved over the years. So in the next few clips, you'll hear Damien and I talking about random things. You'll hear us talking about injuries that we've had. There'll be stories about where we've welcomed new members of family. And talking of welcoming new members, we'll also be playing the episode where Damien and I worked together for the first time as colleagues. We've also got clips from key points over the last year or so where we've introduced things like Damien's Money MOT and also our first ever live event. So there's lots and lots coming up in this week's episode. We're also going to play in between the clips from you guys where you've got in touch to send us a message of support. So thanks once again. And just a reminder, if you hear your voice on this very podcast, you have won yourself a super exclusive I've Been on the Podcast Money to the Masses mug, which we'll be sending out over the Christmas period. Anyone who unfortunately didn't quite make the podcast, and we can't feature everyone because we did get so many in the end, all of you have guaranteed yourself a mug, and we'll be contacting you over the coming days for your addresses to get those mugs sent out. So thanks once again. Right, so here it is then. On with the 250th episode, and I'll see you on the other side.
Leads me on to probably the first piece this week. Do you remember last week we spent a fair bit of time discussing my suitcase?
Yes.
The fabled blue case. Well, this week, the prodigal case has returned. Unbeknownst, well, I didn't know anything about it. This just shows you how ridiculous the whole situation is. That I just put my daughter to bed, and I was just wandering down the stairs, and you know when you sort of creep about a bit because you're trying to make them go to sleep, and next minute it sounded like somebody was trying to kick my front door in. So I was like, what is that? Wandered downstairs, opened the door to be greeted by this guy this van who's just pulled up in the street, sort of screaming at me, "Oh, I've got something for you." And I'm thinking,
oh no,
what? What's this? Said, "Is it a parcel?" No. The fact, what was funny is the way he looked at me as if I was an idiot, and he just looked at me and said, "No, it's a case from Gatwick." I was like, what? So next minute he dragged out my suitcase and dumped it on my doorstep, jumped in his van and disappeared.
Did he have a van full of them?
I don't know. I assume he did. But he was like a drive-by dumping of the suitcase. and I live in a sort of terraced house. And if you imagine this, everybody in the street was probably looking out their window thinking, what is going on over there? It looked like some sort of drug deal. Yeah, you just sort of take it in. And there was a guy walking up the road. He was looking at me as if to say, why has he just had a suitcase dumped on his doorstep? Anyway, we got the suitcase in and it would appear that the suitcase has actually travelled round Europe and made its way back to good old Blighty and Gatwick Airport before coming back to me. What is ridiculous is that we didn't know anything about it, and we're still trying to get in touch with the airline to find out really what's gone on. And we need confirmation in the ridiculous scenario. We need confirmation that the case is back with us. Well, I've got the case, but the guy was so quick to be off. There was no sort of paperwork to say, here is your case or whatever. It's just, yeah, there's your case. What's your problem? And off he went.
No paperwork, no asking for ID. The address could have been wrong, for example. So
yeah, he didn't. He just dumped it. He didn't ask me to prove who I was or anything. So, but there's an interesting point to this. My brother-in-law ended up working for one of the biggest airlines, probably the biggest airline in the UK. And one of the things he was telling me about is, you know, when you have somebody who works in a job that you get these sort of behind-the-scenes tips and insights of what goes on, kind of like what we do with money, I suppose. But he was telling me that actually what happens when your case goes down the old luggage thing in the background and then goes to get on a plane, that barcode that's on there is scanned, and apparently it's meant to be impossible for a bag to get on a plane if it's going to the wrong place. Right. So I don't know how my bag actually ended up on that plane and when. Apparently it was meant to have been stopped, but unless the tags all seemed kosher in terms of being meant to be going to Rome. But the upshot is that Vueling have managed to send a case with no passenger around Europe a few times, and that's not supposed to happen because obviously people could use that to do naughty things and blow planes up. So yeah, there you go. The case is back in the building. Everything was still in it seems, but I'm still now having to. It officially wasn't lost because it came back in 14 days rather than 21, and I've now got to try and chase to get some compensation for the things I've bought, and so there is going to be an ongoing saga with the case, but there we go, it's returned.
That really is crazy. And do you know what? I'm slightly annoyed that your case has clocked up more air miles than I have probably ever. So your case is actually more well travelled than I am.
Yeah, if only it could collect air miles, I should ring them up and say I demand to have the air miles for my case. But it's returned. I can't believe it. But yeah, the saga goes on. We've now got to, I think I'm going to enter the ludicrous scenario where I need to prove when my case came back. And it's going to be like pulling teeth. I think it's, anyway.
Hi Damien, it's Faith from Much More With Less. Just to say many congratulations on reaching your 250th podcast. Absolutely amazing. I really admire you guys for making Money Matters more accessible to a wider audience and especially explaining so well about investing. Here's to the next 250.
Hello and welcome to episode number 59 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Good to be back. Good to be back.
I don't want to give too much away about how we record these podcasts and stuff because I like people to sort of guess how it's all done. But every so often we do use technology to come to the listeners, and we've got to change this week. I can actually see you and hear you properly, which is sometimes a bit of a difficulty living in a village with the worst internet connection in the world. But fibre has hit my village. We have fibre.
You do look clear, Andy. You look more handsome than ever. It's almost like high definition.
Yeah, isn't it? And I can hear you. There's not that awkward sort of gap where I'm thinking, did he just say something to me?
Yeah, or that awkward gap where people think, oh, Damien's whistling on quite a lot, and that's normally because Andy has frozen.
Dropped. Yeah.
Andy has frozen and is pulling a distorted face. We're actually laughing before we even really got going on the podcast because this is vaguely money related, but Andy was just telling me a story off air, which, as a true friend I am, I obviously laughed uncontrollably at. So, Andy, do you want to just tell people what you just told me off air?
Yeah, I got my most recent phone bill through, and it was a time when, funnily enough, I was driving over to see you, and I was listening to Talk Sport, and I thought, I'm going to call in, and I'm going to call into the show. First time I've ever called in on a sports sort of chat radio, but I thought I'd do it. Anyway, I was driving to you, which is about a 40-minute drive, and 30 minutes into driving to you and being on hold and being told every 5 or 10 minutes, oh, don't worry, you'll be through to Collymore in any minute now. And after half an hour, I went through this dodgy connection and the connection dropped out and I lost the call. I thought, oh, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. It obviously wasn't meant to be, and thought no more of it until I got my phone bill through this week. That phone call cost me £15. And I didn't even get to chat to Collymore, which might, some could argue is a good thing. But...
So you paid £15 on a phone bill? And
while I was driving, bearing in mind I had the radio on, I could have just listened to the radio, which would have been far better than the hold music. Although, to be fair, no, from memory, the hold music on the radio station was you listening to the radio station. So yeah, basically, I paid £15 to listen to a free radio station.
I'll tell you what, Andy, you are brilliant with money. That's why you are the chosen co-host of a money podcast.
Hello, it's Richard from Essex here. I am a big fan of the Money to the Masses podcast. Andy and Damien explain things so clearly, so simply, and it's extremely useful, but it's also extremely practical. My favourite episode was a little while ago when the guys were talking about the impact on national insurance credits for stay-at-home mums who weren't claiming child benefit. The exact situation they described applied to us. My wife, who's a stay-at-home mum, had lost out on her national insurance credits. We took the information from the podcast, wrote to HMRC, and all of her credits have now been reinstated. So a real practical and helpful impact on our lives, all thanks to the podcast. But what's more, I work for a wealth management firm and explained the exact same thing to 3 of the wealth managers who you'd think would know better, and they've benefited as well. So thanks Andy and Damien, and good luck with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode number 70 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert Damien Fay, as always, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy 2016, Andy. It's good to be back.
We did say before Christmas that we'll be back in the new year, and we'll be back with some exciting news. And you're going to deliver that to us now, aren't you?
Yeah, well, the exciting news is that I became a dad for the second time. I give away a lot of what goes on in my life on this podcast, and I think that's kind of why it works with Money to the Masses. I'm just basically an ordinary person who teaches people about money, but that was the one thing I held back for the last 9 months, which felt like an age. But yes, my wife and I have just had our second child, and that happened between Christmas and New Year. So if you hear the distant sound of a baby or child crying, then
that's your other child thinking, I'm no longer an only child, they don't love me. Oh no, sorry, you mean it's the new baby.
that probably wouldn't be too far from the truth. So, but the thing is that...
Can I just say, sorry, interject, congratulations, by the way, well done. I think it's brilliant news. Well done.
But the thing that's great about, it's actually got a bit of relevance for the people listening to this podcast, is because if people may not remember the full story of Money to the Masses and where it came from, but when we had our first daughter, I was still working in the city, and that was before I quit the city and started working on Money to the Masses full time. And it was on the day I came back from paternity leave after she was born, and you have one of those realizations, sort of moments of clarity where you think, what am I doing with my life? And you start thinking, where's your career going to go? And what do you really want to do? And what's fulfilling? That was where the idea of Money to the Masses was created, in a coffee shop next to the stock exchange in the city of London. And the idea of just starting to write a blog when it originally started as a blog. So there's a lot of pressure now then, because that means after 2 weeks of this baby being born, I've got to come up with something pretty good. But very exciting for me and my wife, and baby number 2. And that explains to a lot of people who've been listening as to why I was building an extension, a loft, and having water come through my ceiling. And it was out of necessity rather than me just wishing to make my house a bit bigger. But it was actually because we needed the extra room for the new arrival. So all's good with mum and baby, and yes, I'm back into the sleepless nights and nappy changing.
Hi guys. The thing I love the most about the podcast is how honest you are about finances. I've always looked at our finances and wondered where our money goes and why we don't have that much disposable income at the end of the month when we both earn decent salaries. And I've realised that actually we are just probably living a bit beyond our means. And so we've reprioritised where our money goes to focus on paying off a couple of debts. And then hopefully in the next year or so, we'll be able to start investing. So thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to episode number 74 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm good, Andy. I'm good. Well, good and bad this week.
Oh.
I've had a sort of ups and downs in 1 week.
Can I ask for the good news or the bad news first?
Yeah, good news or bad news, Andy?
Okay, I'll go for everyone always goes for the bad news first because they like that little sweetener at the end. So give me the bad news.
Well, the bad news was I got a dad injury. Now, do you remember before I pulled a hamstring once? For people who've not listened to the earlier podcast, when I did a dad's race, it's not as good as that or as spectacular. But I was driving home with my daughter in the back of the car, and she has a tendency to do the pretend she's asleep. She's 6, and so you lift her out of the car and take her in, and I don't think she was really asleep. And my wife said to me, because we've got obviously a new daughter as well, and she said, I'll take the new one in, and if you take Isabella in, and she's asleep, but play along. So anyway, I've been spending the last month lifting a newborn like I am sort of Jeff Capes or something, just lifting them and with one arm, and you kind of get used to that feel. Well, I then went into the back of the car and attempted to lift a 6-year-old child out with the same amount of intensity and sort of probably bit blasé. And as I picked her up, I could just feel I just went with it, and I should have stopped. And the small of my back just went, and it was killing me. So I got a dad injury by basically picking up my own child out of the car to be sweet and sort of not wake her up and play along with she's asleep, let's take her up, and then left with me. But for the next few days, moaning every time I'm sort of getting in and out of a chair like an old man. So yeah, I managed to do my back in, lifting a child who's pretending to be asleep.
Well, I think Isabella should feel a little bit guilty about that, especially if she was pretending. Funny enough, our daughter does exactly the same thing. Just before it's time to go up to bed, or just before it's time to get out of the car, pretend she's asleep. And I think it's this little thing they do to get a little sneaky cuddle. I think it's quite sweet, really. But yes, unfortunately, you're back.
You say that. I've just dawned on me. My cat does it as well. My cat does the same.
What?
I tell you what I'll do. I will take a video of it, because if my cat, she doesn't go in the car, so I don't lift her out of the car, but my cat will be in the house, and she'll know it's bedtime. I'm a bit soppy with the cat, and I'll find wherever she is, and I go, "Come on, Bella, it's bedtime," and the cat's called Bella. So
hang on a minute. So you've got a daughter called Isabella and a cat called Bella.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
The cat probably thinks we're talking to it all the time, getting told off. What's it mean? Get my shoes on. But
what came first, the cat or the daughter?
It's the age-old question. But the chicken or the egg? It was the cat, actually. But the cat does it. The cat sort of just makes herself big on the floor and lays down. I have to scoop her up and carry her down 2 flights of stairs into the kitchen, and it's the same game we play every night. So it must be my fault. I am encouraging this kind of collapsing game of pretending you're asleep. But anyway, the good news, Andy, I'll go on to the good news. Just a quick one on this. This is just the most ridiculous competition win I've ever had. I won an electric toothbrush.
Really?
Yeah, winning, Andy. I mean, yeah, an electric toothbrush. Have you ever won something as incredible as that?
How come? I mean, you're going to have to tell us how you won it.
Well, this is the bizarre thing. Goes to show you that people... I remember looking before about people who enter competitions for a living. And there's a tip. I remember seeing somebody who'd won all sorts of things, holidays, cars. And the way they do it is they go and find competitions that are really bizarre that no one enters. Or the... Do you know what I mean? They don't just go for the big ones for the big companies. They try and find things where there's going to be a greater chance of winning. And in the actual extreme version of this, I went and had my teeth checked, like an annual checkup on my teeth. And when I went to the receptionist at my dentist, she said, do you want to book next year's appointment? I said, well, I might as well. There's no harm in doing so. And she said, oh, you can also enter into the free prize draw to win a toothbrush, electric toothbrush, if you do that. And I went, well, as it's free, I'll enter. So you put your name on a card. And I just, as I did it, I thought, what other saddo in this world is booking a dentist appointment for 2017 right now and in this dentist practice? And I just knew that I was going to win. So anyway, they rang me up and left me a voicemail saying, you've won. You can have an electric toothbrush or a bottle of bubbly or money off your dentist appointments.
Have you gone for the toothbrush?
Oh, I just went for the toothbrush in the end, yeah. So, yeah, I got to pick a toothbrush. So there you go, Andy. I am a winner.
Hello, it's David Withington here from Wigan in Lancashire, where they don't speak proper. My wife got really excited when I first started listening to Money to the Masses, thinking a lot of money was coming her way, but she was quite disappointed when I told her she'd actually misheard it, and in fact it wasn't called Money to the Missus. But now she's happy for me to listen to every Money to the Masses episode, knowing that I'm picking up loads of great money tips, which means more money to the missus after all. So, thank you Damien and Andy for all the great content, and congratulations on the 250th episode from me and the missus.
Hello and welcome to episode 109 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, how you doing? Welcome back.
Good to be back, Andy. Sorry, that's a bit unprofessional to start the show laughing, but Andy was away last week. And it took,
yeah, I'm a bit rusty.
It took Andy 2 takes to get the opening of the show. He'd forgotten how he started it, even though we are on episode 109. I'm good, Andy, anyway, in answer to your question.
Hey guys, I've just come across your podcast recently and I am hooked. I'm going through your back catalogue and even the stuff you done at the beginning is still relevant now, which is brilliant. So keep up the good work and hopefully I'll get caught up with all the episodes soon. Cheers.
Hello and welcome to episode 125 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. That beard in half coming on well.
Do you know what, Andy? I've not shaved or trimmed for about a week and a half. I've just been so busy.
You don't need to tell me that.
No.
You don't need to tell me that.
I'm going to actually, after this podcast, not just because you pointed it out, but I'm due to go out later tonight, so I don't want to turn up a complete tramp. But yeah, I haven't.
You've got a perfect face for podcasts, is what I would say right now. So, how's your week been, my friend? How's it been?
It was less insulting than the previous 30 seconds, but yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm massively excited, as you know, Andy, because one of the things we're going to talk about today is the One Giant Leap podcast. So it's alive, it's out there, you can go and listen to it, but we're going to talk about it in part today as one of the sections. So yeah, as you know, Andy, it's a labour of love and something that's pretty much been 7 years in the making, and you are an integral part of it, because you've turned it into the piece of magic that it is, because you did all the editing, as you ever do. You skillfully do.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what the response is going to be. I know I'm slightly biased. I know you, and I've been part of the process from the beginning to where it is right now. But I honestly have to say this. I've probably got about 30 podcasts that I subscribe to. I'm a real podcast addict. And it's right up there. It's, even though I've listened to it, edited it, and I know all about it, I've actually listened to it already. It came out today. Today's Friday. The first true proper episode and interview came out today with Oliver and from Cornerstone, and it was brilliant. I listened to the whole thing, and genuinely one of my favourite podcasts that's on my actual device. Yeah,
I'm glad you say you didn't say favourite. You said one of, which was quite disappointing. No, I'm only joking. It was brilliant. No, it was brilliant because it's important to me what you think, because obviously you've been part of it and you're one of the only people who did hear the recordings, because you heard the raw recordings and what I was trying to achieve, and so it was important when you fed back what you thought about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about that, and people, I think, Andy, you're going to splice in a bit of the first interview, just a small snippet, just to get people excited about it. and then we'll tell people how they can listen to it, because it's the most important thing they need to do today is to subscribe to the new podcast.
Hi, this is Claire. Just wanted to say congratulations to Money to the Masses. I love your podcast. Look forward to listening to it every week. It's really helped me to sort my finances out. And I really look forward to tuning in. So thanks very much to everything Money to the Masses do. It's great.
Hello and welcome to episode 132 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, how you doing?
I'm good, Andy. How are you? You look a little bit... what should I say? In pain? Stiff?
yeah, I'm a little bit in pain. Cracked a rib a couple of nights ago, so I'm on the tablets at the moment.
No way! How did you crack a rib?
Weirdly, playing football. I went in goal. I felt a little tweak on my left calf, so I thought I'll take it easy and go in goal. And then 10 minutes later, I've broken a rib.
I shouldn't really laugh, but I think you probably know by now. You're not going to get much sympathy from me. I'm only like that because I'm just as bad with my stories of tearing hamstrings. So, what did you run into the post, or did you?
No, it was really innocuous. A shot came my way, and I did what could only be described as like an Olympic quality dive, but unfortunately fell rather awkwardly straight on my side and back, and I just felt a crack. I thought I was having a heart attack at one point. I was making these weird sort of noises that I've never made before because I was winded as well. And but the good news is I did not concede a goal.
Oh, well, that's the main thing, Andy. But now you're presumably, if you've cracked a rib, they take a long time to heal. So I'm guessing you've got a few weeks of sitting there doing what you're doing now, which is wincing every now and then when you move in a slightly... I've never seen somebody in pain doing a podcast before. It doesn't seem to be the sort of activity that could induce pain, but clearly...
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, and I've got that thing now where I've got to decide whether that's me hanging up my boots. I mean, I'm coming up 38 this year.
Gloves, Andy. Hanging up your gloves, because technically you're in goal. Maybe if you'd played out on pitch, you would have been okay.
This podcast, by far and none, is one of the most easily digestible forms of content I've listened to in a while, especially around all things finance. Damien and Andy do a really good job of just making things sound a lot simpler in terms of the world of finance, and they're doing a justice to the education of many people that just don't simply get this education in school or in university. All in all, a really good podcast. It has to be number one in the finance podcast, and it's definitely one worth subscribing to. I've been a long-term subscriber, and I'll continue listening for many, many years to come.
Hello and welcome to episode 141 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm good, Andy. We're back again on a late Friday night, aren't we? It's been another busy week, and I swore this week we'd be, well, I would be. It's not to you, is it, Andy? It's me who makes us late. I would do it a bit earlier in the week, but yet again on a Friday night, we're recording the podcast due to me working like a dog.
So it sounds like you've been super busy as always then, Damien. What have you been up to this week? What's delayed you?
Well, do you know what it is, Andy? I'm one of life's...
procrastinators?
I am a bit of a procrastinator, actually. I'm funny, I'm one of these people who I'm quite extreme. I can be incredibly decisive, but I can also... do you know what it is? I think I get distracted. I'm distracted easily, I admit that. In terms of decisive, I'm the guy who, if you go to dinner with me, if I get down to like the second thing on the menu and I like it, I don't go any further. I can actually go to those extremes. There could be something amazing on the rest of it, and my wife's the complete opposite. But I do get distracted by the things that are of interest, like I did. Like I did. Like I did just got distracted. I was looking at something. Sorry, look. I just proved my point.
Hi Damien and Andy. I'd just like to say congratulations on the podcast, especially being the 250th episode, and the humour and the rapport between you both makes the podcasts really enjoyable to listen to. So congratulations.
Hello and welcome to episode 176 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, before we start, I must apologise. I've got a beautiful bit of birdsong going in the background, but it might be quite annoying for you and for the listener. Yeah, I do apologise about that. Can you hear it?
Well, no, it's a blackbird. If people listen carefully, if it does sing, it's a blackbird. I can tell from here, even though I'm probably 60 miles away. But because I am a bit of a closet twitcher. I do like birds, and so I can tell it's a blackbird. But yeah, leave it in there. We've had a bit of spring, so why not?
Anyway, enough of the Bill Oddie stuff. It's great to have you back, my friend. You've been away, and obviously we've been away for a week. What have you been up to?
Well, I turned 40 last week, so my twin and I and our respective partners, we went to New York for a few days to celebrate the milestone. I've never been to New York. It's a place I've always wanted to go to, and yeah, we had a fab time. It was great to get away without the kids for the first time in ages, and just spend a few days wandering the streets of New York. You feel like you've already been there because there's so much of it we see on TV. And yeah, I wandered around, did all the sites, the Empire State Building. If you ever go there, go up the Empire State Building at night. It's particularly impressive. Did a helicopter ride. That was one of my presents. And yeah, there's lots of surprises along the way. People who rocked up who I didn't expect to, like family members and friends. So yeah, it was brilliant, Andy. So I'd like to thank everybody who wished me happy birthday as well during the trip. There's a lot of people who are podcast listeners, people who use the website, or 80/20 investor members who got in touch via email and Twitter, Facebook, to wish me happy birthday, which is fantastic. It's really nice to have people wishing you a happy birthday who you've never met. So there is a picture, or one or two pictures, in New York on our Facebook page that I put up there, if only for the comedy value that my brother and I seemed to accidentally wear the same outfit every night we went out, and as twins it just seemed like we were trying to do it. And it's an occupational hazard of being a twin, that you can go somewhere and wear exactly the same colour top or something similar. And yes, we did that a number of times, so it was brilliant. So I'm back in the UK.
Just like to say, I've been listening to the show for longer than I care to remember, and it's as fresh as when it started. While other podcasts have fallen by the wayside and I've stopped listening, this one just keeps me coming back for more. The advice is as good as ever, and both Damien and Andy are hilarious, working together really well. I subscribe to 80/20 Investor and look after things myself rather than use an advisor at the moment. I'd highly recommend you give it a try. My most memorable moment was meeting Damien in the pub for a quick chat one night, and then having to be rescued 4 hours later by my wife and daughter because we were having such a great time. What a lovely bloke, but boy, headaches all round the next day. Keep up the great work, and I think it's brilliant what you do. All the best.
Hello and welcome to episode 190 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. How are you doing? You looking good?
I'm good, Andy. Busy as ever. I managed to lock myself out of a house today with no shoes, which was interesting. I managed to overcome the situation.
That sounds like the premise of some sort of Carry On movie.
Look, I won't go into too much detail, but do you remember years ago I house sat for somebody, and technology seemed to ruin things by the person being in Thailand and seeing me alter their thermostat because it was the winter, and they were getting alerted in Thailand and thought something was wrong and turned their boiler on and off. It was kind of technology. It was like that. So technology ended up meaning that I was round somebody's house. I was house sitting very, very sort of briefly. I was in the house. I didn't have my shoes on, and then they messaged me to say that Amazon had delivered a parcel to the house, but I was in it. And I was like, that's strange. They said, it appears that they've left it in our waste area. They've got like a little, one of these little wooden boxes outside their house where they put their wheelie bins. Yeah. And so I walked out the house to go and have a look, because the person who was in, again, the other side of the world technology had informed them of this. I walked out the house with only my socks on, and I didn't realise, but the door blew shut behind me, and the keys, and I was stuck outside with no shoes in the rain. So there you go. So I blame technology, not my own foolishness. But the weird thing was, as I walked out the door, I thought, there's no wind, the door won't shut. I'd even calculated the odds of that happening, completely dismissed it. So that was my day anyway. So
The only one question I've got on that, I mean, believe me, there are lots, is why you decided to proceed outside of the house without shoes on. It's fair enough. I walk outside of the house without shoes on. But the fact that it was raining, that kind of, that one doesn't compute.
Well, I'd only decided it was just round the side of their house. I didn't really need to. I thought I could tiptoe quickly round, and in the end, I failed, and I won't go into too many details, but it involved me getting a builder who was working across the road to help me basically break back into the house, and having to convince him that I wasn't a burglar, which pretty much boiled down to the fact I said to him, well, I haven't got shoes on my feet, and and that confused look seemed to be enough to convince him I was responsible enough and obviously the right person to be let back into the house I was trying to enter. But anyway, that's me, Andy. So how was your week? Let's not dwell on my stupidity.
My week was okay. I was going to say, but hearing you say about tiptoeing out of the house and thinking you could probably make a dash for it and make it back. And did I ever tell you the time that I tried to outrun the speed of light?
No, Andy. I have to.
Okay, so what happened is one evening, and I don't drink. Okay, so this
just
this is
drugs by the sound of it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a story that follows drink. I decided that I needed to turn the light off, and I got halfway up the stairs and forgot to turn the light off, and it was like a lamp on the other side of the room. And I thought, and my phone was upstairs. I didn't have a torch on me, and so for some reason in my head, I walked over to the lamp and thought to myself, right, I'll quickly turn this off and I'll get to the other side of the room. And it was pitch black in the middle of winter. I turned the light off and started running, thinking I'll make it to the other end of the room while it's still light. And I got halfway across the room. It was completely pitch black. And I just realised at that point, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm trying to outrun this light turning off. And obviously I got stuck in the middle of the room and had to crawl to the edge of the room to find the wall to go back upstairs. Anyway, it's weird.
Damon, Andy, I love your show. I love it in the rain. I love it in the snow. I love your patter and your endless natter. I love it most because it really does matter. I don't want to be rich, but also not poor. I just want to have my own front door. And I love my work. I love my job. But I could do with saving a couple of bob. So I follow your podcast for some savings ideas, and I hope to retire in a couple of years. Happy 250th, guys. From Nick in Chester.
Hello and welcome to episode 198 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, how you doing, my friend?
I've got a slightly sore head this morning, Andy, I have to admit, but and you can probably hear in my voice that it was probably slightly a late one last night.
Yeah, and I think you owe it to the listeners to explain why you've got a bit of a sore head and a croaky voice. So what happened last night?
Well, it was their fault, because anybody who listens to this podcast knows that we've been talking about doing a meet-up. And we did a meet-up, me and you, Andy, and Pete Matthew from Meaningful Money. And we basically went to a pub in the centre of the city of London and said to people, it's an open invite. We've been promoting it on social media, a podcast, newsletter, on the website, and just said, come along. And that's what exactly happened, didn't it, Andy?
It did. And before the meetup, I said to you, off pod, I said to you, because I'm naturally pessimistic, and I know we have got lots of listeners, and I know that potentially people would have liked to have come, but because I'm a pessimist, I said to you tentatively, I reckon single numbers, perhaps even as low as 4, just because I'm an eternal pessimist. And, well, how many turned up, David? It was crazy.
I don't know. I kind of lost count because the pub was busy. It was packed. But, I mean, on and off throughout the night, it must have been, what would you say, about 50 people came to the whole thing?
Yeah, I would tentatively guess it was somewhere between 40 to 50 over the course of the evening, and it was just awesome. It was so good.
Yeah, so I want to say thank you to everybody who made the effort, and there were some people who came from quite some distances. I think the longest one was somebody travelled all the way up from Maidstone, specifically. They didn't even work in London, so I'm eternally
No,
grateful.
Damien, I can beat that. There was a lovely gentleman named Bob, and also Vlad, who travelled down from Manchester, and they don't live in the area, and they purposely came down.
Whoa! I didn't know that. I didn't know that one. I didn't know that's where they were from. I mean, this week's podcast isn't going to be that long. So if you're looking at the sort of timings of the podcast, you're thinking that's quite a short one. It's because we wanted to have a quick show to thank everybody for coming. It is a Saturday that we're doing this because the meetup was on a Friday. But for those of you who didn't come, it was amazing because we had so many people come along and we were chatting to them all and they were talking to each other and making friends, and it was a really good atmosphere. So they've all said they want to do it again. So we will try in the future to do another event because there was everybody got a lot out of it, so including us. Because what was fantastic about it is I was able to stand there and we could talk to you guys who listen to this podcast and find out what you like, what you want to have topics on, and just stories of people who say, "Oh, I listened to one. I always remember one podcast where you said this, and I did it. It had this impact on me." And that's amazing because you have to remember we do these podcasts and the stuff goes out there, and we don't necessarily get any direct feedback from it. I mean, one of my favourites was a chap who had negotiated with Hargreaves Lansdown on the size of the fee he pays, which is normally about 0.45%. He negotiated it down to 0.25% a year. It doesn't sound a lot, but it actually works out to be a couple of thousand a year that he saves, but that would be every year. So that was a fantastic story to hear that he'd done that after listening to the podcast. So there you go. If you are with Hargreaves and have a sizable amount of money with them, you can do the same. So all that feedback, there were people coming up with stories of how one guy paid down £100,000 worth of debt, which was incredible.
I had another story from a lady who had actually read your book, and as a result had checked her tax codes and had made several thousand, I think it was £7,000 worth of savings on tax, specifically again through the content that you send out there, and as a result she listened to the podcast and loves it. So all of these stories were fantastic to hear last night.
So if you have any questions and things you want to send in, I've told a number of you who came last night to email things in because I wanted to continue the conversation.
Hey, so I'll be honest, I've never actually listened to your podcast. My boyfriend, however, listens all the time, so he's pressurised me into sending this message in the hope that I will get a mug. And I hear it's your 250th episode coming up soon, so congratulations!
Hello and welcome to episode 201 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, how are you doing, buddy? You good?
Yeah, I'm good, Andy. I'm very good, actually, because we've got something to celebrate, haven't we, this week? Rather than us sit there and say to each other, what have we been up to? We've been toasting an award, haven't we?
We're award winners. We've been nominated before, but I'm very pleased to say that, yes, we are award winners. I'll let you tell the listeners what we've won.
We're an award-winning podcast. Now, there is a set of awards that occur that every year. There's a group called the UK Money Bloggers. They have an award ceremony which is sponsored by quite well-known companies. You name a retail company out there or website, they'll sponsor an award. Investment companies like Schroders, and they've actually been able to build it up into quite a thing. And I know we're not money bloggers or anything anymore. I know Money to the Masses back in the depths of time started that way, but they then created a podcast category just to celebrate money podcasts generally. So Pete Matthew is nominated in the category. He won it last year, in fact, and other well-known podcasts that people who listen to this podcast do. When we had our meetup, they named some of the other podcasts. And anyway, they had the award ceremony for this year, and we won, Andy, didn't we? We were named the best money podcast in the UK, putting Pete Matthew into second place, which was, if you're going to beat a money podcast, Pete's is the one to beat. So, yep, that was nice to receive that, and thank you to the sponsors of that, who actually I think was Schroders, funny enough. But I don't think they would particularly like me because I sent out a tweet about 2 days later laughing at something that they were doing as a business model, and they're teaming up with lawyers to launch an advice service to fill the advice gap, and I joked as if that was going to solve the problems. But it's really good. So we're award winners, Andy, and that's very nice to have that recognition. But all we really like is the recognition of our listeners, so leave us a review.
Hi, my name's Gavin. I live in Lugano, Switzerland, and been listening to the podcast for the last couple of years. It's great. I love it. It's each episode's a good start to the week, and I'm an Arsenal fan, so after each weekend, I need something good to look forward to. So thanks a lot, guys. Keep up the good work.
So this is a kind of a special podcast in many ways, and you're going to explain why.
Yeah, because you're going to hear somebody you're going to think is me. And I don't know if you know, some of you may have heard me talk about him or seen stuff on Instagram, but I have a twin, and his name is Justin, and he is one of the other people, one of the brains behind Money to the Masses. So Money to the Masses is a team, as you know. There's Andy, but there's others behind the scenes, such as Lauren, and obviously, very importantly, Justin. Now, this week is always going to be a show where we were going to talk about the Money MOT, and we're going to focus on it and explain what it does, how it works, how it came to be, and actually the future of the MOT and how it's going to evolve, but also why it's so brilliant. But of course, with me sounding like I do and trying not to sniff and cough, Justin is the brains behind this and how it was developed. So what we're going to do is Justin's going to talk through this. He's going to give you a bit of a behind the curtains view about how the Money to the Masses MOT, well, Damien's Money MOT works, and what we're going to do going forward. So for now, I'm going to hand over to Andy, who's going to basically take control of the show, and this is going to be a special that's worth listening to.
So here we are with the power of editing. We're here with Justin from Money to the Masses. Now, we have mentioned Justin in the past in the podcast, but we probably haven't gone into a lot of depth into what you do and what your job is at Money to the Masses. So I think that's a good place to start. Justin, welcome to the show, by the way.
I'm ecstatic. Thank you for having me. It's the first and probably only time I'll be allowed on this podcast, which is a good thing for everyone. And apologies if I'm freaking anybody out because I sound similar apparently to Damien. And I also apologise if I refer to him as Damo, because after 40 years I probably am going to do that.
You mentioned about you two sounding similar, by the way. Do you feel like you sound very different? Because your voice in your head is very different to how you sound.
Massively. I think I sound completely different, but
better, of course.
But when I listen to the podcast is quite a weird experience because it sounds like me doing a podcast and I know it's not. So yeah, when we do calls, if we're doing calls with work, we both have to announce ourselves. It's Justin talking, it's Damien talking. Yeah. And even if I pick up the phone in the car when we're out driving about, I have to announce to his wife, it's me talking and not Damien. So it is pretty weird for some people and even stranger for me, I can tell you.
Hi, Money to the Masses, Faye here. Congratulations on your 250th podcast episode. Thank you for everything that you do. I've been listening for about 10 months in my quest to educate myself around stocks, shares and investing, because it's not anything really that I understand. I've always wanted to learn and have never found a way to learn, because I really am, or was 10 months ago, a complete beginner. And, it was quite difficult. So the thing I really like about the podcast is it doesn't assume any prior knowledge. You put things in plain English and you make really difficult concepts easy for people like me to understand. And it just makes the stocks and shares market so much more accessible to the everyday person. That's what I really like about Money to the Masses. So here's to another 250 and all the very best for the future. Thanks again.
Hello and welcome to episode 210 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. How are we doing? We're in the office, we're together, we're loving it.
That's what I was just about to say. This is a monumental episode because it's the first time we've done it together in the office and as colleagues, Andy. So this is it going forward. So you may hear the odd noise, but it's because we do it in the office now. So almost right on cue there, I think there's one in the background. So it's really exciting. So we normally always talk about how was your week, Andy? How was your week, Damien? We're going to still do that largely going forward because you guys like to know bits and pieces we've been up to. But I obviously know what you've been up to this week, Andy. But how has your week been at your new job?
Yeah, well, it's a weird one, isn't it? So so I can tell you, Dave, I've had an interesting week. I started a new job and my employer's okay, treating me well. Took me out for lunch the other day. That was really nice. I've really genuinely loved it. I mean, we won't sort of enthuse and go too much into it. And over the weeks, people will hear what's going on and what I'm up to, what you're up to, and together what we're achieving. But genuinely absolutely loving it, and I think the listeners are going to appreciate and benefit from both of us working together, because I think there'll be more insight and better quality work, actually, because I'm not having to do it in my spare time. I'm doing it for my day job.
Yeah, and we'll be able to push out more. So watch Instagram, go on social media. We're really ramping that up, and I know a lot of you have been in touch with Lauren in the background. She's doing a lot of that stuff for us.
Hello, it's Gavin from Whitstable in Kent. I want to say thank you to everyone in the team at Money for the Masses for making it all possible, and also to all the podcast listeners out there. Congratulations. Congratulations for deciding to listen to the podcast, and no matter where you are on the Money to the Masses journey, well done.
Hello and welcome to episode 240 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. How are you doing?
Well, I'm amazing, Andy. It feels like the day after the night before. So we're recording this after the Money to the Masses event this week. So it was a massive success, and it was everything I hoped it would be. It felt like almost 10 years in the making. So those of you who don't know, which I think most of you do, we did an event at the General Assembly.
Stopped on about it for about 6 weeks.
We did an event at the General Assembly in London called Building a Champagne Lifestyle on a Lemonade Budget. And it was quite a wide-ranging event that covered lots of topics from investing, pensions, couponing, budgeting, and we had some fantastic panellists. We had Lynn James from Mrs. Moneypenny, we had Jordan Cox, who's known as the Coupon Kid. We had Emily from Habito, and of course Sean from the Money Dashboard. And I was on the panel, and obviously, Andy, you were the fantastic host of the entire thing. And based on the feedback from the event, it was a success, because obviously when you put on an event, you've got a lot of things going on. You've got to hope that people turn up. Yeah. And we knew we could rely on you all to come to the event.
Yeah, even though it was terrible weather and there was tube strikes and all sorts, we were a little bit panicky, but it didn't affect anything.
But it was amazing. On the way, we called a taxi on the way to the event. We're going through past Canary Wharf, and we were watching the lightning strikes around Canary Wharf. And then when we came out the other side of the Blackwall Tunnel, so if you're not from London, it's a tunnel that runs under the Thames. And when we came out the other side, it was like a biblical downpour. Yeah. And the roads were flooded, and it got to the point where people were being swept aside by 6 foot high waves of water from cars and buses that we went past. And of course, the tubes then all seemed to grind to a halt. So we had this event going on, and it was almost as if the gods were trying to stop it happening, but they didn't achieve it. And it was amazing. It was packed to the rafters. We were full up. It was standing room only in the end. And the event lasted for about an hour or so. We did a Q&A session. We had some great warm-up stuff we did with, gave away a bottle of champagne, which was a bit of a surprise. And we did some Q&A afterwards, which we used some technology that enabled everybody to ask questions. So it was a wonderful event. I was so chuffed with what the team did, Andy did. We had so much good feedback where people came up to us and said they thought that the event was brilliant. They wanted us to do more events. Okay, so Andy did mention at the start of the podcast that I wasn't very well, a poor voice, but I've managed to get some of my voice back just to come on the podcast and say thank you to everybody who sent in voice recordings, and thank you to everybody who has supported the podcast over the last 5 years, and Money to the Masses in general. It's been an incredible journey, and here's to the next 250.